might be almost exactly the day. This is now January 28th, 1991. And we're 2 weeks into a war that I was hoping would never have to happen. And you and I have been talking about it for the last 6 months at least. So,
yeah, well, one of the purposes of this videotape is I've had on my mind for several years, from approximately 1981, it's kind of a missing chapter of information that I had volunteered publicly prior. In other words, in talks and conferences, and I think we have a videotape on the subject of plane crashes and things of that nature. There was a great deal of work done by the priests of the Order of Melchizedek, people that are not in the order, that are just spiritually oriented, many near-death experiencers. There was a lot of people band together with sometimes minimal information, but gave spiritual energy and so on for the purposes of well-being and cushioning tragic events, delaying precognitive events for the purposes of either having them rather miraculously not take place and make a contradiction to something that is still considered a precognition, and so on, and credit to all of them. The chapter that I have really wished to share and not been able to share was regarding a person's proper name, because very often some of the information that I talk about is of a military nature or in world events or criminal, and people's proper names, it's not very appropriate to divulge their names for obvious reasons, as well as some very subtle spiritual reasons. And that bothers me, because I have a tendency to want to share anything and everything all the time. Well, because of the events of the last week or so in the Persian Gulf and the fact that we are at war with Iraq, it has finally come to pass. In fact, I've actually wanted to make this videotape for a couple of weeks. It's an appropriate timing to divulge the little secret chapter that was that I've had to keep secret for so long. And one of the reasons that I want to do this is to help people that are reasonably ignorant about the cause and effect relationship, or the righteousness, if you will, of this military conflict that we have in the Middle East. And I think that what I'm about to say will help people in regards to being able to see in perspective the necessity for the military intervention, the fact that other meanings, peace proposals, the United Nations condemnation, suggestions from all different angles and so on have failed. Have failed regarding Saddam Hussein, have failed regarding other people of authority and so on in the Middle East, and with their invasion tactics and greed and ego. So what I think I'll do is start and give you a synopsis of a story that I have shared before, and information leading up to the Middle East crisis. And we tried just prior to this tape to get an exact date of the meeting that I had at the University of Connecticut in the residence of Dr. Kenneth Ring at the time. And we're assuming now that it was 1981. Right?
October 12th of 1981.
Okay. There's a possibility that it was definitely October 12th. In fact, in the wee hours of the morning, so technically October 13th. We're not sure right now if it was 1980 or 82. So in other words, somewhere between those 3 years, it was one of those years. But definitely on the nighttime of October 12th, and specifically a precognition took place at exactly 3:15 in the morning of October 13th. A very rare occurrence. In fact, it had never happened to me prior to this. Let me make that a little clearer by saying from 1978 in my near-death experience, I had had several precognitions, various forms, various types. Typically, they would be roughly 30 days ahead in time, with the exception of a precognition that I had understood as soon as I recuperated and was able to think rationally from the accident that created my near-death experience. That, of course, was to have been a nuclear detonation of a malicious nature, and it was to have had taken place by August 15th of 1988. Now, as most of you know who will be watching this videotape, that event did not take place. And, of course, one of the things that typically the people who see this videotape, and, of course, the people of the priesthood and of other walks of life and so on have worked so hard to accomplish. So what we're going to talk about tonight is another accomplishment that had taken place that was purposely kept a little bit secret. The conversation that I was having into the wee hours of the morning was focused on the life and times of Jesus Christ. I was on a roll. I was asked a specific question by someone, I don't even recall who, there were many people in the room, and I was babbling a mile a minute, which is, I guess, is typical of me at times, and I was concentrating and enjoying, and many people were enjoying my company. So it was a usual, typical, and normal thing. It was also typical in those roundtable discussions, as we call them, that people would do additional work. They would have tape recorders on, and then if, for instance, as was the case, Dr. Kenneth Ring was there, and he was talking to the then secretary of the International Association for Near-Death Studies office, and all-around good guy and girl Friday, Leah Andrews. They were making some arrangements for a meeting coming up in the next short while. I say that because I don't know the time frame from October 12th to December 17th. Yeah, that would be 2 months. So, obviously, by what I'm about to say, it was for a meeting regarding December 17th. Well, it was typical of people to talk and sometimes interrupt with loud tones or voices, and that wouldn't have bothered me. But for some reason or no apparent reason at all, Dr. Kenneth Ring yelled across the room to Leah Andrews when she was making a phone call to set up some kind of an appointment, and he said, Leah, make that December 17th, just like that. And Leah nodded, and everything was silent. Now, what that did to me was, I'm assuming at this point, by the power of suggestion of hearing Ken Ring yell December 17th, my mind or my spiritual consciousness that was kind of, shall I say, something similar to reading the Akashic records of the life and times of Jesus Christ, suddenly became focused on worldly events of December 17th. What I experienced initially was a visualization of what would typically appear in the newspaper of the following morning on the front page. And it was as though I was looking at any major newspaper of a particular plane crash that was being advertised in the, or shown in the newspaper that took place on December 17th. So that was the initial main focus. What actually took place in a split of second out of time was my awareness of many, many very extraordinary details of this precognitive plane crash in California of a B-52 bomber, military plane. A new version, they have a shorter rudder, things like that. Now, as I was able to see it, I was able to know of intimate and spiritual and personal details of the event, the 9 men aboard the plane that died, animals nearby the plane crash and under the plane that also died in the event. And that was a little bit traumatic, mostly the fact that four horses died. That bothered me emotionally. That was very emotional for me. It was not, however, emotional to know personally and intimately and spiritually the 9 men who died. In other words, it was righteous, it was just for them to die in that way. It was their karmic fulfillment, if you understand that phrase. The horses were corralled there, natural beings, not there by desire necessarily, and in effect they were killed by man's intervention. So that was one thing that was both emotional and, let me just say, extraordinary. The greater intensive, longer in duration of time was a simultaneously timely event. By that I mean, I don't recall the time right now that the plane was to crash in California, but whatever time that was during the day, 3 hours difference, the same time in effect, in New York State, nearby where we live, about 100 miles away, there would be a rather identical B-52 bomber leaving the runway, taking off out of Griffith Air Force Base in the middle of New York State. That was the greater priority for my attention because that would have been the first plane taking off with a cruise missile, a Tomahawk cruise missile, and it was the first of the beginning of a series of test flights that was proposed to go into Canada, up to the Arctic Circle, come back down into Canadian airspace, and practice bomb a bombing range on the Alberta-Saskatchewan border in the northern regions where they have a Canadian military bombing range. All right, and that was the first of a series. Now, it wasn't just the plane, it wasn't the series of flights, it wasn't the cruise missiles. What I suddenly became aware of in extraordinary detail was that two very high-ranking United States military officials schemed and deceived and decided that they would do something both illegal and immoral, and they came up with a scheme that by ordering this series of test flights and documenting it on film, going through a long period of time, many millions of dollars in expenditures and so on, they would be able to have a potential buyer for Tomahawk cruise missiles, sub rosa, or in other words, not legal, and by allowing and producing the sale of those things, they would be able to get rich. They would be able to pad their pockets. And again, I'm judgmentally saying illegally and immorally. That became a priority of my focus for 3.5 years in time. In other words, that series, as I did say it several times publicly prior to the event and during the 3.5-year period of time, that it was something that was a priority of mine that was not just and right, spiritually speaking, or legally in many other ways, and that it should be stopped or denied in any way, shape, or form. That set up a series of coincidences, which we all smile about because a synchronistic series of events that I participated, many other people facilitated and participated, and created the denial of, again, a precognitive thing that was straightforward precognitive, that nothing at all was done. It would have taken place exactly as I perceived it in that instant out of time on October 13th at 3 o'clock a.m.
So between that time of October and December 17th, it appears you sort of struggled with knowing that this was a possibility of happening.
Yeah, in the conversation there were several tape recorders going, and because of what I then blurted out in a very emotional way, in other words, I was crying profusely, just the fact that this was so extraordinary and emotional. I was so emotionally concerned about the horses, and yet I was emotionally concerned about why do I have to know this? I mean, things that you can imagine would be very frustrating. So I had to interrupt myself, and I walked from the dining room area, the table that we were sitting at in this conversation, went out on a balcony and collected my thoughts, gained my composure, so to speak, came back in, and Dr. Kenneth Ring, in his psychology voice, which is a little lower and deeper, and he said, "Well, no, Tom, I see that something is obviously upset." And I said to him, smiling, I said, "Ken, knock off the psychology talk. This is just me." So he had his voice pitch a little higher, and he talked like he normally talks to his friends. And he said, Thomas, obviously something has happened that you're aware of that's very upsetting. Is it something that you can possibly share with us? Well, typical of me, I wanted to say everything. I wanted to tell it all. So I tried a couple of times, and I was only able to blurt out, some very significant, interesting details of the plane that crashed. I gave serial numbers of plane parts. I gave a description of the people on board. I gave a description of their families that were not on board the plane. Notice I gave many very exciting and interesting details. The Enquirer magazine would have wished that they were there. I then realized that this was being tape recorded, and because it was a precognition, at that time in my life I was very self-protective, self-protective and so on, and I didn't think that this psychic stuff was all just a big game and everybody wants to document it and all that stuff, and I was offended by that part of it. So I had to require my veto power of the tape recordings. I had to say, well, Ken Ring can keep them in his files, but you cannot use this or my name in the current research other than for statistical data. In other words, they could not use my name, the dates of the events, the proper names, the significant details that I had blurted out.
So, are you ready to move along to December 16th?
Yeah, I think I should for the sake of time, because I can give so many details which are all interesting, but that's not the gist of what I want to talk about today. So, let's move up to December 16th. Now, I drove back from Connecticut, and of course with extraordinary thoughts. I'm now rationalizing. I'm using logical deductive reasoning, which usually fails me in spiritual matters, only becomes more of a frustration. And of course I had to think about a lot of things. I had to deal, well, I know this, what am I supposed to do, what can I do, should any of this be made public? And
can we just bluntly right now say that the sale would have been to Iraq? I don't think we've said that.
Yeah, we have, and I purposely am playing a game by not saying that. Yeah, we should say that. Well, now that's not actually proper to say. These two high-ranking United States military officials had a single individual who had millions and millions of dollars and was going to purchase these things. These ruthless military officials didn't care who they would have sold them to. To make a long story very short and give you the idea of what we're driving at, these nuclear-capable Tomahawk cruise missiles were to be sold to a well-known figure nowadays of Saddam Hussein. That means that within the next 3 or 4 years of roughly 1981, so certainly by, what can I say, 1985 or 6? I mean, help me with the math.
Yeah.
In other words, certainly several years ago, if the sale were to have taken place, Saddam Hussein would have had nuclear capability, able to deploy nuclear devices to a minimum of a 600-mile range from any part in his country, and nuclear capability. With that, the gist of this conversation is to give you a perspective that we are very fortunate, militaristically, realistically, and spiritually speaking, that never took place. And that as of this day, Saddam Hussein does have a nuclear capability regarding devices, but he does not have the ability to deploy them in a missile or in a cruise-type missile, intercontinental ballistic missile, or airplane suitable for carrying and using these in a typical war or in world domination, as his mindset was obviously set out to do.
So the reason that didn't happen, if we could go back to December 16th, was one singular phone call.
The series of things that took place that denied the sale was, with my awareness, I took upon myself that there were several stages to this. I'll talk about it in stages. First of all, one of the things that I was concentrating on as an immediate emergency thing that I should try to delay was that in the series of test flights of B-52 bombers carrying mock cruise missiles, those without nuclear capability, but cruise missiles to this bombing range, was that on the several attempts or flights, one of those flights would include, and I had extraordinary detail regarding an air disaster that the missile itself and parts of the plane were to fall in a populated area in Canada. I've got a lot of friends in Canada too. That was a priority of mine because that was to have had taken place in the next few days. If there was some way that I could even delay any part of it, including the first flight, which was not the flight that would have crashed. And also, don't misunderstand me, the plane was not to have crashed. The plane would continue flying, but it would have created death and destruction on the ground in Canada. Would you like to interrupt?
So, therefore, you knew a gentleman in Canada.
All right, I made a phone call to a friend of mine in Canada, never thinking of, in other words, for the moment I wasn't concentrating on the fact that B-52s were going into Canada, and I didn't call this person for that reason. I called a friend of mine regarding bicycle racing. So in other words, it was totally...
Now I understand what you were saying. So prior to that, you were saying, I have this precognitive information, and I'm only one person, and there's really nothing I can do, and offered it up for, like, help, and then went on with your life, sort of. Is that
Yeah, even though it was on my conscious mind most of my awake hours, and even the few hours that I used to sleep in those days. So in other words, it was a priority of mine, but with priorities on your mind, you also do normal functions, like call friends and so on. I called a friend in Canada regarding bicycle racing. I talked to him for a little while, and flippantly, or coincidentally, actually thinking that was probably advertised in the newspaper that there were going to be military maneuvers in a neighboring country. You would almost expect it.
So you weren't thinking you were telling him anything?
No, I was just making a sarcastic, dry humor joke, and I said his name, and I said, by the way, how do you guys feel about the United States sending B-52 bombers into Canadian airspace to make a bomb run up in the Alberta-Saskatchewan bombing range? And he said, eh? Instead of, huh?
Yeah.
Anyway, he questioned me, and I said, well, I figured, you'd know that. And then I gave enough details, like there are going to be a series of test flights into Canadian airspace for the greed and ego of American officials. And he said, well, gee, Tom, that's strange you should tell me that. And then he announced back to me that he was a major participant in an organization that would typically protest such activity as Fight for Peace, Save the Whales, in other words, a Greenpeace type organization. And I don't want to identify either the organization or my friend for confidentiality and so on. But at any rate, he said, well, gee, thank you very much. Now, small talk was had, goodbye, and thank you very much, and we hung the phone up. I hung the phone up, I never gave it another thought. I didn't think anything into it at all as to would he be interested in this information or would he act on that information. Well, now we have to scoot forward to the next day, and this was now December 17th, and I purposely came home from work and watched the news. I have to admit, I still have feelings of arrogance when I do that because it's not, in a way, spiritually, it's not correct for me to run home and watch the news to verify and have confirmed something that I have said precognitively. It's always the truth, and I don't need to do that. But there's the humanistic part of me that I get some little degree of comfort, or oftentimes I arrogantly say to my wife, Elaine, see, that's what I was talking about. So bear with me if that took place. So anyway, I came home, and the 6 o'clock news came on, and I was much surprised to find out that 250 Canadians had crossed the border early that morning and had paraded to Griffiths Air Force Base to protest the launching of B-52 bombers, even though if it was a practice run. And they had surrounded Griffiths Air Force Base, and the commander of the base had decided, rather than to agitate these protesters more, that they would be willing to delay the planned flights of that day. So the delay took place. If you want to call that synchronistic or with God's help, fine, I'll agree with all of that. The B-52 bombers, as one's flying overhead.
I heard that this time. Usually when you say that, I don't hear a thing.
The
B-52 flying overhead, not a bomber.
Well, it is a bomber.
Is it always a bomber?
See, anything with those military planes, they have B in front of it, stand for bomber.
Oh.
In other words, it's the bomber number 52, and they're usually in a series. In other words, the newer ones will be a B larger number, like a B. In World War II, it would be a B-17 or B-29. So we're up to 52s now and more.
I guess I.
In fact, we're so far into the numbers now. We have the B-1B.
Whatever you say.
Yeah, that's the B-2. We're almost starting over with numbers again. Some of the more modern planes.
So
This delay tactic, in effect, just the fact that it pushed everything backwards in time, if you want to perceive it that way, that's all right. Backwards in time, that delay tactic alone gave me verification that, since that was facilitated, the series of events that were timely, in other words, if that first plane took off on time, the next couple of planes would take off scheduled, right?
It would be like a domino thing, everything would fall into place.
Good way of perceiving it, that the domino effect was so timely that the scheduling would be such that the precognition of the air disaster and the death and destruction that would create in Canada did not take place, and it did not take place, I might add. So now, this would be in the next couple of months from the onset of the original precognition. In the next several months, I made several more trips to research organizations and people that were in enough confidence with me that I was able to say a few more details now and then. I was inhibited. I was very overly protective of myself and of the information. I eventually was able to tell military officials and other people that were able to do and facilitate other things regarding the two high-ranking military officials that were the perpetrators of all of this. As we said on the onset already, that the series of tests did not take place as planned. Now, two other major things took place. One was, I said that the B-52 bombers going into Canada should not take place, but the test series have to take place. Now, when I said it that way, I meant by, I can't think of a right phrase, something like almost by the rules of nature, there aren't even rules or regulations per se, but it just had to be that the test series had to take place. Let me give you an example. If I know precognitively that a plane has to crash on a certain date, it will happen. Now, if it were a crash where everybody on board would die, that would take place if nothing else was done. Now, spiritual intervention, attitudinal changes, divine interventions on a rare occasion, things like that, it is typical that the plane will still crash, but the cushioning effect, the more positive effect, could very well be that as opposed to 500 people on board the plane, that only 100 and some people would die, a few others would most unfortunately be burned and so on, but the positive thing would be more than 130 people would walk off that plane. So that's a better thing, and as judgmentally, we usually think that that's a cushioning effect, and that's a better than bad situation. So the better than bad situation was, in this case, that the series of tests were a precognition, and by the law of conservation, for lack of a better phrase. It had to take place, right? And I confused a few people by saying the series in Canada will not take place, but ultimately the series of cruise missiles tests will have to take place. Now, because of the delay tactics and many other things, it was disallowed ultimately for those planes to fly into Canada. There was some confusion about the exact location. I made a mistake in the phraseology or terminology of the first night I spoke about this. I said, well, I'm getting confused and I'm not sure if it's a cold lake or if it's Loon Lake in Canada. But it's either a cold lake with a loon on it or it's Loon Lake that is very cold. And the problem was a mixture of, because as I said that on October 13th, I was clairvoyantly seeing what the lake looked like, which was not froze over, but it was cold, and in fact there was a great American loon, beautiful bird, in the middle of the lake. So at that time, I was seeing the lake as it was at that hour.
In December?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. On October 13th at 3:15 in the morning.
You were seeing it as it was October 13th?
Yes. As the lake was on October 13th, I was seeing it clairvoyantly from Connecticut. Confusing that with on December 17th and part of the projected series of test runs up there, which would run into the cold weather, the lake was froze over. And by the way, the name of the lake was Cold Lake. So, I mean, you can see how you can get caught up in the words. So, that was denied. I'm losing track of the time frame, but let me say the next year or so, because this has to fit in properly within a 3.5-year period of time. In that 3.5-year period of time, the test series, these military officials, before they were policed and discovered, they then tried a second thing of having the test series put into the Utah-Nevada desert. And pretty much there's 3 or 4 states geographically that come together there. And that's pretty well the center of what I'm talking about. I'm not recalling the name of the place. It's not White Sands. But anyway, out that way. In the middle of the desert there's another bombing range. And they decided, well, it's not the same tundra and as good as going to the Arctic Circle, but at least it's legal and we can get away with it, so we can sell these cruise missiles. So the test series started to take place, and I advertised enough information at talks at Marianne Ayanacone's hairdressing salon, at priesthood meetings, at conferences, and so on, and advertising to many people, and it turns out, thank God, enough people, that a series of events would be taking place. And I mean, do you recall any of that? Was that I was saying that?
Vaguely, not the time, but just the story.
All right, because, what I was saying is that we have the capability of love bombing, and in other words, can you telekinetically burst a missile and fire? No, you can't. I can't individually. Even a group of people that are very intensive regarding telekinetic manipulation does not have the capability of destroying a metallic object. So what do we have the capability of doing? I came up with a phrase with the help from some people of love bombing. Now I thought love bombing, B-O-M-B-I-G. And somebody said, well, you could call it the same thing, but call it love bombing, B-A-L-M-I-N-G. And so in other words, that combination of word phrase would mean that with extraordinary, and I have to say compared to average people, most people watching this videotape, it would require of their normal capabilities extraordinary capabilities. And they would require a great deal of effort and energy, mostly in terms of spiritual energy, for the purposes of love bombing those cruise missiles. It had to be with an attitude of love. And I want to emphasize this, that it had to be with a positive attitude. If you had an attitude that you're going to destroy a bad, nasty missile, forget it, it won't work. If you had the attitude that you're going to do a good and righteous and marvel, the Tomahawk cruise missile, and the 7 computers on board, and the phenomenal, I'm rambling on with a bunch of words, then feasibly you could, if given an idea of the exact time, the exact location, what I call loci, and with a proper attitude and so on, and of course the timing and everything had to be exactly precise. I mean, within a millisecond. And if that cruise missile be in flight and functioning, and we could focus spiritually on the solid state circuitry of any one chip or solid state circuit in any of the 7 computers on board, and as though visualize and see and love the functioning of the electronics of it all, and then as though you or I were to actually be there, or collectively we all will be there, and watch the next electron coming towards you and be in its way, not in its way like in harm's way or anything, but sort of become part of it, that would positively, in a positive manner, positively affect that electron. It would be telekinetically affected. Now, to change this attitude and everything else so I can describe to you easier, what effect would that have in a computer? Well, the effect would be what's called a glitch. And those theoretically or conceivably, it could create a genuine glitch in one chip with solid-state circuitry in any one computer. If that takes place in or on a cruise missile, that will immediately be acted and reacted upon the other 6 computers, and it will down all 7 computers. In other words, it's a fail-safe system, they say. I love that phrase. Fail-safe system that one checks on the other. So if there's a glitch in one of the computers, the missile will slow down, stop, or ultimately fall out of the air, not function as it was programmed to do.
These particular missiles that you're talking about, in all we've heard in the last couple of weeks about the anti-missiles, the ones that are stopping the Scud missiles.
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be 2 kinds of missiles. One is the one that is going to do the damage, and one is the one that's going to intercept. So this was a type of missile that would
right. A Tomahawk cruise missile is a pre-programmed missile that can be launched from, and I'll be willing to even throw in something that isn't quite advertised right now, but there is what's called a, well, let me just say that they're a very large, heavy missile, and they require a large B-52 bomber to launch. And most recently, there has been a launch from a submarine in the Persian Gulf, the identical type cruise missile, and it functioned perfectly. They also can be launched from a ship with a special launching pad. Because of their size and weight and so on, they have never been able to be carried by fighter planes or smaller jets and so on. And I have gotten a report most recently that they have the capability, which I am not sure if I even believe. I want to see it to believe it. That can be launched from a 1,500-mile-an-hour fighter-type jet. I'm sure that it's designed just for that purpose. All right, so these missiles are designed to travel at around 600 miles an hour for a distance of 600 miles maximum, roughly speaking. And they have the geography within feet. In other words, in height, they know every hill, every major thing in the way, and they have the entire Earth's surface memorized in their computers. They can be carried to a different site, launched, and they will instantly, the missile will instantly recognize itself as to where it is in the world, and it will have the program as to where they wish it to go, and it can fly around buildings, around trees, over hills, under bridges if necessary, and of course focus on the target within a matter of inches. So a phenomenally technologically advanced missile. And it is the type that can carry conventional warhead or any type of warhead, including very high-powered nuclear bombs, nuclear capability.
So for the purpose
It's also improbable that an anti-missile as exists today, such as the typical Patriot missile, which is an anti-missile missile, it is the highest of improbabilities that an anti-missile missile can shoot it down. All right, now, one of our Patriot missiles would be very unlikely to be able to stop a cruise missile in flight. I would say it's impossible. Well, you have to be careful saying those words. It's not impossible, but it isn't going to happen.
So for the purposes of this video, your precognition, even without your thinking you could possibly have this capability of reaching anybody, one thing after another led into the fact that now today, in the middle of this war, Hussein does not have the capabilities of having this type of a weapon.
Yes, and even more ironic than that, if you can be at all comfortable with the righteousness of the military intervention and what we, the United States, are participating in the Allied forces, you certainly are aware that some of the very surgical, accurately detailed strikes through windows and over ledges and so on are being carried out by United States Tomahawk cruise missiles. And isn't it ironic that we are using them righteously to go against Saddam Hussein and his military machine, instead of having Saddam Hussein launch them outwardly to the Allied forces with nuclear devices and total chaos and such destruction on the earth that the earth would not be the same, and in a very short period of time would not sustain normal life. In other words, he would have had enough nuclear capability to change life forms. In other words, there would be a residual gamma radiation effect from fallout and so on, and destruction of chemicals and plants and the human condition, that it would not have necessarily been the so-called Holocaust, but it would have created enough gamma radiation in the atmosphere that practically everybody would be dying from cancers from radiation.
So now let's get into what's really, I'm better with it now since I talked to you, but I know a lot of the audience, a lot of the people who are watching are probably coming from where I have come from all my life, that we ought to be able to pray away this situation without military intervention and loss of life. You know, you look at the television and you see people marching for peace. I've always been out there. That's where my heart is. You know, how can we justify the killing? And you and I had a conversation when this all broke out, and I said to you, Tom, how can you be loving and kill at the same time?
How did I do? What did I say?
Well, what you said to me, basically, you made it very simplistic in saying, you know, if you were sitting on this side of the room and you had a baby and a playpen on the other side of the room, and a man walked in with a knife and was headed toward your baby, you could lovingly probably blow the man away. That in having a reverence for life, there are times when you have to have a reverence to protect it, rather than just
also
try to
another
pray it
phrase
away.
that is so popular with so many people, and that I have talked about and I have declared that we are in the onset of the New Age. Now, to a lot of people, the New Age is all lovey-dovey, flowers and stuff like that. You hug people, you don't hit people. And I'm saying that flippantly on purpose just to get it out, because people understand what I'm saying by those few words. And I agree with that, and I declared that myself. I've participated in a lot of things regarding that. Usually in the same conversation, I would say that have been ignoring my spiritual work and giving up that employment and actually going broke, or, it's often we're so materialistic, we think that money is security. And they're finding their security in often a very chaotic transition. They're finding that security in their spiritual work. Now, the transitional state for that person with the employment problem is that they're going to lose all their money, might even lose their domicile, their house, and the chaos that creates. Well, on a worldwide scale and so on, worldwide, culturally, nationally, by armies, by societies, by religions, by cultures, I think I repeated that, cultures, there is also, on that scale, cultural changes, and I'm saying cultural changes even if it be your religiosity. Those from a cultural change, you might enhance, change, or deny your religiosity, your religion. Politically, you might change your politics in a chaotic way by cultural conditioning. The cultural conditioning is on the onset or the recognition of this hypothetical new age. In that capacity, we have the polarization of the materialistic ego world, the greed and ego, power, masculine, and I'm saying the spiritual masculine, not that it's all guys, not girls. And there are many women who have a masculine, dominant, materialistic ego problem. I'm describing the characteristics of all of us. No, all of us have certain characters. I'm talking when it's lopsided, when it's out of balance. And of course, a typical example is most high-ranking politicians. God bless every one of them. Most leaders of country, most multi-millionaires. What is the driving force that has put them in the position of clenched fist power or monetary power or manipulation power or military power, all these powers, these masculine ego, sometimes malicious and arrogant power positions. Okay, Saddam Hussein is a perfect example of that. What is his motivation? His motivation is ego. His motivation is greed. Greed and ego. It's ironic also that right now there is little or nothing being done by most people regarding an attempt and a desire through spiritual work to diffuse the ego of the man Saddam Hussein, the people that are following him and taking great sensationalism and joy of the leadership and the false security of a dominant character, a dominant leader, which again is ego. They're feeding their ego by having this marvelous champion leader.
Well, let's go back to what you were saying about not being able to stop the missile through anger or hatred. There's no way we can stop the greed and ego of Hussein by hating.
That's right. A very good point. I'm jealous now that you thought of it. A very good point. Yes, as a matter of fact. And the people that, in all of their righteousness, and God bless them, with perfectly good intentions, but are saying, gee, I've been to all the peace movements, I pray every night, I do my personal Om Shantis and everything else, but I hate that man. I mean, that is a failure, and be cautious of doing that. I mean, try to love the spiritual essence of that man's soul. That man's soul, through free will and other things, he is this monster. He is this greedy, egotistical man, this leader. With power, potential to do good things, he is doing negative and bad things. He's accumulating materialism, he's feeding his own ego. All right, we understand this well enough.
But there is a spiritual side to him, or the men or women men or people that are around him.
Well,
could be reached by the power of prayer.
Yes, and let me put it this way. If this very moment right now, Saddam Hussein, he the man, has an attitudinal change, suddenly realize a near-death experience, a spontaneous spiritual awakening, a love bomb hits him. I mean, should we love that man? Should we love bomb him? I say yes. Can he have an attitudinal change? And within a matter of hours, could he destruction is already there. As much has been done. That can't be erased or backed up. Some of it can be cured. Some of it can't be cured. Or I should say rebuilt and so on. But can he stop and change? The answer is yes. It might require something rather extraordinary. It might require a spontaneous spiritual awakening on his part, suddenly seeing love is the basis for authentic empowerment, as opposed to manipulative, man-made greed, ego, power.
So here we are, 2 weeks or whatever into this war. What do you, putting you on the spot,
Yeah.
what do you foresee happening in the next month, 2 months, 6 months?
Well, now we've just talked about the probability, the possibility of an attitudinal change, of a love-bombing effect. And you have to know me well enough, and for anybody who has never met me, please know me well enough to know that I often play, I've always disliked the word the devil's advocate. I mean, that's a terrible phrase. But anyway, for the sake of conversation, for the sake of showing, teaching, and telling, I often say things that I personally don't do, that knows my philosophy, my attitude. You would do well to follow me in the middle of the night sometime, or do what I do. In other words, I practice a lot of what I preach. I fervently pray very often with great intensity. As I go places, I do things. I'm not just a talker. And at the same time, I might know precognitively a future event. I am the first one to be aware of and share with anybody that future precognitive, straightforward precognitive, absolute future scenarios are changeable. They're changeable through free will. They're changeable through changing karmic fulfillment and other things that are indescribable. Nothing is absolute. So in future scenarios, I might say something that is precognitive, such as, will this war continue for the next 3 months? As of this date, I will say the highest of probabilities, 99.99%. Probability that this war will continue for 3 months or more. Will we have military intervention in the Middle East a year from now? As things are going as of this moment, the answer to that is honestly yes. That does not mean that the outright war, that offensive type war, will be going on that long. But will there still be military intervention, military intelligence, military presence, intervention? As it stands right now, my answer is yes. Will troops be sent home in less than a year? As things stand right now, the answer is yes on a very large scale. So there's a positive. At least look forward to. So many people have made this horrendous a comparison to a Vietnam. This is not a Vietnam situation. This is nothing at all like Vietnam. Either its onset, its purpose, its motivation, militaristically, governmentally, all the different ways. There's no comparison at all. God bless the horrible situation of Vietnam, and God bless the righteousness, if you will. I want to upgrade the basic difference of this situation in the Middle East right now. Lessons to be learned. There are lessons that are being learned that will allow the cessation of world domination, motivated, greedy, arrogant governments, military armies, that the situation right now in the Middle East is a lesson that is being demonstrated and shown that will eliminate immediate future, in the next couple of years, few years, of other governments, other armies that have had plans for 10 years or more, 5 years minimum, of invasions of their neighboring countries, world domination in the back of their mind, and militaristically gaining material things, gaining the imperialistic, gaining of countries. You know what I'm talking about. Am I making myself clear?
Yeah. Well, yeah, in the last 6 months maybe, I'm not even sure the time that we've talked about this. Of course,
Let me interrupt you, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And let me ask you a question while the videotape is on. Have I talked to you intensively about Israel regarding the near future?
No.
I'm going to leave it at that. It's like a little seed. It's just something. Hopefully, in a couple of months, I'll be able to make another videotape and give of a non-future scenario regarding the country Israel, and a future scenario that with the demonstration, the actuality of the demonstration of what we are accomplishing with the Allied forces. I want to emphasize that too, because this is not the world power United States of America that should and is, whether you like it or not, the world police force. I mean, it is. But with the United Nations, so that it's not just the United States. Granted, it's our technology that's being shown and bragged about, and that will be the ultimate deterrent for these several other scenarios, that if this continues to move along as it is, and if this, in fact, it's already taken place, that enough demonstration of high technological advanced military might excludes some of these other scenarios from taking place. And they're saying, those individuals are saying, my God, I didn't really know that they had this stuff. We better forget about our plans in the next couple of years. It's not going to work. The United States alone will intervene and put us down. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So, don't think that this scenario is righteous or just because we're putting down Saddam Hussein and his invasion of this tiny little speck of land way out of our earsight and eyesight of Kuwait. It's much more than that. It's putting a stop to, militaristically, I'm sorry to say, it's putting a stop to many future scenarios. The delay tactic that I was involved in regarding the denial of Saddam Hussein gaining nuclear deployment capabilities of Tomahawk cruise missiles back several years ago only was an ultimate delay tactic for the last couple of months. As many of you know, Elaine and I went to Germany to visit a military official, and we had a wonderful time. That was toward the end of July. At the end of July, there was information known of a crisis in the Middle East that we now know as Iraq and Kuwait. There was information known then. So this isn't something that really popped up like sometimes the television portrays.
My phone has been ringing off the wall ever since this happened, of people that can't get through you or Dan, of people who were taken off guard, they really surprised that all this had happened. And I guess the fact that living close enough to you, that you and I have had ongoing discussions on the fact that if Hussein had convinced the world powers that he wanted to cooperate, and we all thought everything was smoothing out, what you had said was that if this hadn't happened in the last couple of weeks, that in 2 years he would have had the nuclear capabilities to do just what you said he did.
Right. And just to clarify, the rough 2-year period of time from now and into the future, I mean, because of the names that we've given, that did not mean that he would have Tomahawk cruise missiles.
But he would have had
But he would have nuclear deployable capability, nuclear deployment capability.
So what you've been telling me in the last few months is that what's happening now...
In other words, from other stories and situations that I've been directly involved in, and you, Carol, and many other people know that there are nuclear devices, nuclear bomb-type devices existing in the Middle East right now. Crude, large-sized things. With that technology, it's usually a very short period of time, 1 or 2 years, that they can condense that proper instrumentation and capabilities and so on, to the size and weight of being able to be deployed by mobile units, either trucks, ships, large planes, and so on. And this was, at this point in time, that future scenario, as Saddam Hussein was, in his terms, progressing, in the next 2 years, he would have had this capability. So it was a close call back a few years ago that he would have had nuclear capabilities by this time. That did not take place, thank God. Right as of this time, he does not have that capability, thank God. And we, the people of the world, the United Nations, the Allied forces, are stopping it. We prayed for divine intervention. We prayed for his attitudinal change. His attitudinal change did not take place. And that hurts a lot of people's feelings, mine in particular. It did not take place. We are not failures for that. We tried hard. Famous phrase by, I can't think of the name of the guy, many years ago. Speak softly and carry a big stick. Now, right. And, that doesn't normally fit in to lovey-dovey talk of New Age type, Om Shanti, healing services and things like that. But you know me pretty well, and you know that, the last thing I want to do is hit anybody. The last thing I would prefer to, the first thing I would prefer to do is hug anybody. Anybody. Absolutely anybody. The person that I would least typically like to be with, I will meet and hug genuinely, honestly. Okay, so I am that person. And at the same time, I've really been cautioning every time I talk, I caution, there will still be chaotic situations where you individually and collectively are going to have to decide appropriate measures that do not suit you, do not suit your new image, your new personality, your new spirituality. And that we are carnivorous beings. We are, we're participating in entropy. We're not excluded from that. We have to kill plants and animals to subsist. And we're still part of that. Not on the nitrogen cycle yet.
So what you were telling me was that what we're going through right now is a healing process of the planet?
Yes. I mean, as horrible as that seems, like, say, wait a minute, the very thing we're avoiding, we're into, we're participating in.
It's like when you have a little child and you don't say, don't hit your brother and then give him a swat. It's like we're in the middle of saying, don't hit your brother and giving him a swat. Mm-hmm. It's just, one of the priests from out in the Milwaukee area, I think I was talking to recently, and I told him what you had shared with me about protecting your child or the protection of or the preciousness of life that has to sometimes be protected. And I guess I'm going to hit you with this. Maybe I did on the phone already. He pretty much said, well, the only one law in the whole world for all people is that you're responsible for what you do. Mm-hmm. When you stand ultimately before the light,
yes,
you're responsible for what you do. Mm-hmm. And so that means those of us who are having sons over there, as you do, and husbands and brothers and all of that, and we're praying, thanking them for protecting the world or whatever. They're still, they and we, because we back them up, are responsible for this war machine that's going on that will ultimately save the planet.
On that spiritual level, on that ultimate level, every single one of us is responsible for the oil slick in the Persian Gulf. We're responsible for Saddam Hussein being the way he is. On that level we are. We're responsible for everything we do, and I certainly learned for everything we even think. And the answer is yes to that. There are many levels to that. And down on this mundane level, earthly level, is that you eat and drink to exist. And in doing that, you're killing. You're killing biological life forms, you're killing sometimes animals, you're certainly killing vegetables, and so on. But that's right and just. It's the scheme of things. Well, on a certain gross level, which is maybe a little more intensive than eating plants, and knowing that you're killing plants to eat them, in the realm of entropy, on a very intensive and gross level, there is that malice, greed, ego is not unusual. It is the norm for many, many people. On a mundane level, it is in all of us. Every single one of us that I have hugged and that I have met in the last 12 years, including myself, have a measurable degree of greed and or ego. And we try to control it. We try to be aware of it, first of all. I would say close to half of the people, certainly in the United States, are not even aware of this phrase ego. They think it's only egotistical ego. They don't know about the spiritual ego and how it feeds itself and how it motivates us, how it sometimes overwhelms us. And that exists. We haven't erased that. We've had attitudinal changes. We have recognition of love, peace, and joy, and we wish for that, and we want that. A majority of the people have not dealt with that in their own lives. Do I still own a handgun? Now, you know that I do. You know that it's used as a horrendous dry humor joke. The fact that on many times I've tried to sell them, and others, say, this is a symbol. But then I start to think, this yin and the yang. It's a symbol of who I was back then. I never hunted with them. I certainly have never shot anybody. I was a target shooter. I was very good at it, and it was fun, and it was a bona fide sport. And I did that. Now, I don't do that. I even enjoy firing them with the kids once in a while on the farm. All right? Many people disagree with even that. And I try to have that balance. Should I throw them out? That's a bona fide thing to do. I mean, if I'm going to preach all the guns should be put down, we should love one another, should I start by getting rid of my handgun, my shotgun? And then I think, wow, now wait a minute. I have affected people in very strange and unusual ways by still having possession and ownership of an instrument that can be used for both gaining my food in certain circumstances, those righteously, those for subsistence, as well as ultimate militaristic protection, God forbid, or even ultimately, disgustingly, even the thought of using it for killing or maiming or hurting. And as oftentimes as I've gone to sell them and turn them in, or throw them away, give them away, and of course I've had to deal with all of that, I think, no, it's just not the right time. Now, I'm not saying that it's not the right time because I might need them or use them. I'm saying psychologically and spiritually to a degree, but mostly psychologically, who am I kidding? And this is something that can I own and possess and maintain control of? And is that a lesson for a lot of the people that are in, what's the rifle club? American Rifle Association. Yeah.
National Rifle Association.
Yes, right. National Rifle Association. In other words, can I go to a National Rifle Association picnic and first of all fit in? The answer is yes. I talk about target shooting, the hunting that I did with my father and so on, and do I fit in? Am I there to convince them to lay down their arms and be a more loving person? No. It's not my job. Your job is not necessarily to convince people and make them see the light. Your job is to show by who you are, by your character, by your characteristics, and by your actions. Now, it's almost as though I'm contradicting myself because some people will say, Tom, but you own a gun. And I go, yeah. And they'll be bothered by that. You know? And those people don't need to have that or see it or use it to have an attitudinal change or to progress. want to say they live in a dream world, but they get what? You know, it's almost as though they're living a lifestyle of wish fulfillment only, and they're blinded. They've got blinders on to the reality of they might have very well changed, but they still live in a society and in organizations and governments and so on that are based on materialism, greed, and ego. Let me put it this way. Do you pay your taxes? You know? I mean, yes, you pay your taxes.
Yeah, I've been so kind of confused with my old thinking and what's happening now. I've always been so against taxes going into the military, and now what I'm watching is that because it did, they're almost surgically taking out things instead of people. And I've never realized that that's a...
There's many things that we're going to have to recognize that we, here I go with should, you know, but that we should recognize. This is a terrible thing that's taking place over there. I deplore the whole thing. If there was a way that I could involve myself and change it to a better way, I would. I was talking briefly with one of the guys at the highway department of average intelligence, pretty well learned, watches enough television, the type of like the news and so on. So knows I don't want to tell you that he was intellectual and intellect, nor was he retarded or dumb or any way, shape, or form. No, he was quite average. He was an average individual, a guy friend of mine. And to make it real simple and short, what I told him, because he was arguing with me about the righteousness of being over there, and I explained to him that my father did not get forced to speak German. He could have if he wanted to, but he wasn't forced to speak German. That I did not have to speak Japanese. And as things are going right now, my son Tim will not be forced to speak Iraqi. Now that's an awfully simplistic way of looking at it, but when world events on a scale larger than your neighbor or your child or your spouse takes place, it should and sometimes has to be addressed for the purposes of survival. We're not talking about intervening in Kuwait because of oil. We're not talking about we don't like Muslims. We're not talking about this guy hurt somebody and we're the righteous, arrogant people that are going to go and punish him. A lot of people have that attitude, but as the government has stated, and with the United Nations resolutions that we're pushing to the limit, I'll admit, we're there to take care of more than that. We're there to facilitate the survival of nations, not the survival of an oil field or the survival of one people over another locally. We're talking about the survival and the stopping of a Hitler, a Japanese empire, and I'm referring to the World War II type empire. God bless any similar phrase or people or modern people that still might consider themselves of the Japanese empire, if you want to qualify that. And of course, the people of Iraq. The people of Iraq are people.
Right.
I mean, they're victims as your victims
all
here.
over. They should have their own ways intact as well, their own culture.
And now it's unlike, you drop back to World War II, the intentions were to get involved and save this and save that. This is the first war where there is a very methodical, careful plan for minimizing. In other words, the emphasis is to minimize the loss of human life. There's never been another conflict where that's been a consideration. Even the carpet bombing that is taking place from B-52 bombers, it is a minimum. They are not carpet bombing populated areas. I mean, trust my knowledge on this, and of course military forces in Kuwait, and this has been pretty well documented already, that this type of carpet bombing from very high altitudes for the purpose of destroying large areas and military personnel in that area. Yes, we are killing some of those people. I'm sorry for that. I wish there could be another way. But in view of the circumstances, it is for survival.
Of the planet.
Ultimately for the planet, yes. And notice if this, and it is simplistically, if this is not stopped now, in a matter of a few years, I mean a couple of years, a few years, not 10 years, not more than 10 years, not the next, next big generation or anything else, just a matter of months, it will be, it could conceivably be unstoppable. By unstoppable, I mean, yes, we could win a war. In other words, if Saddam Hussein had nuclear capabilities and then got ultimately offensive and went through Kuwait and started into Saudi Arabia, and of course, which is obvious that he would, predictably that he would, the highest of probability that he would, in that short period of time, it would be stoppable, but there will be irreversible or something like irrevocable damage. And of course, even if simplistically you only want to think in terms of nuclear, having a Chernobyl times 100.
Well, let me ask you two questions. Basically, you and I discussed, and you told me that if it ever got to the point, you foresaw that the war had to happen. But you said that if it came down to ground troops going in, that really isn't necessary. That's the greed and ego of the politicians and wanting to make money out of the war and that sort of thing. That we do have the capability to not reduce this war to the ground troops going in with the tanks and the Boy Scouts and all of that. That's one thing. Do you foresee now that we've gotten into this, that is going to happen?
Okay, first problem with that is the term, okay? Ground forces, if you mean Army tanks and ground forces going trench by trench and so on, yeah. And what I said, I still go by, I still feel quite adamant, I've never used that word, quite adamant about that. And what I said to you still holds. Ground forces mean more than Army troops with rifles running toward booby traps and foxholes, okay? What I see right now, the tactics that they're using, the actuality of what's taking place right now, is that there are ground forces already in Kuwait, already in Iraq, and that they are being used. It is the image of World War I, World War II, Vietnam, certain parts of Korea, the Korean conflict, of rifles, bayoneted rifled men running toward other men, shooting them. All right? I'm not even going to deny that an event like that will take place where there will be a man seeing another man and needing or having to shoot for survival and military overthrow. There's a difference in terminology, and of course this conflict in the technical hardware that's being used. My son is working with ground forces. My son has already done certain things on both sides of the border of those countries. That's not the same as, in fact, he doesn't even have a gun or any weapon of destruction. He deals with the electronics, okay? And I'm not painting him pretty just because he's my son or anything. Happens to be what he does as a job, as his employment. He may be ordered to pick up a gun, and he will follow those orders. That's the type of person he is and so on. There are ground troops. There are vehicles that have gone across the border already toward military personnel of the Iraqi army. Right? That's already taken place. It's taking place, and it will take place. So when you hear on the television and reports that ground forces are moving in, I'm cautioning everybody about holding on to this image of people shooting other people in foxholes and trenches.
You're warning them against that. That's
I'm warning, and let me put it this way. The highest of probabilities is that is taking place as of this time, whatever this day is over there, it is taking place, it already has taken place, and it will take place on a large scale. Okay? If Saddam Hussein does not politically, and in his capacity as the leader, give up Kuwait, he will be driven out. If it gets down to the last few rifles in buildings or in underground trenches, they will have to be rooted out, invited, coaxed, and ultimately pushed or forced out. The answer to that is yes. If it comes to that, they will be. With the new developments of massive planes going into Iran, that's both good and bad. I'm afraid that it's more bad than anything. Militaristically speaking, and the old Tom Sawyer would say, send a message to Iran to, they might want to recommend put them at the far end of the runway because we'll be there in 10 minutes. And I don't think that it's right and just to allow that kind of military hardware. I mean, we've already gone in to take the guy's toys away, and now he's salvaging some of his toys, that terrible phrase that I use, meaning some of these fighter jets that he's harboring and salvaging and wanting to hang on to. That's inappropriate as far as I'm concerned. I have to give in and let the military officials for the next several days deal with that in the way they see fit. I'm not the expert, they are. That's unfortunate. There will be ground troops used. I'm cautioning everybody, don't have the image of these poor, unfortunate young men walking across the sand. I mean, you'll probably even have a videotape of a few men walking on the sand, and it's not like that. I spoke to my son Saturday morning on the telephone.
That's amazing. He's in Kuwait, and you spoke to him on the telephone.
Yes. In fact, he had to be very careful how he told Elaine. Elaine questioned him, and how he told Elaine that the location where he was right on the border, which was okay for us to tell a few weeks ago, or I didn't mean to say a few weeks ago, a week or so ago, however long the number of days are, the other day ago, that it was on the border, right by about 50 miles south of Kuwait City. He was able to tell us that he's moving to another location. Well, another location won't be farther south, it'll be farther north. I mean, notice he didn't say that, and that's not official, he can't be blamed for that. Notice we have to, a very logical deduction or assumption that it'll be farther north. And he is among some of the ground troops. He's in several different kinds of vehicles. Okay? He's not walking across the sand, although he does have a pet scorpion. Shouldn't put this in the videotape. He found a scorpion, so he's keeping it as a mascot. Wouldn't you if you're a 22-year-old Rambo?
Crazy son.
And it's either blue or green, so that's a nice color, whatever it is. All right, so he's there and he's doing that. Now, he's using electronics and so on. There are other people that are in his immediate vicinity that have war weapons. A1M1 tanks, things of that nature. I don't want to, there's the things that I can either assume or know. I don't want to, give too much information either.
Well, hopefully by the time anyone sees this video, it'll all be over. At least we'll be into the maintenance kind of thing. I guess my selfish question for those of us who are planning to be going over to Egypt in November of this year, which would be 1991.
My opinion is that's up in the air. In other words, conceivably, it is very realistic. My eyebrows not just a possibility, it's a probability at this point. As to how high a probability, I wouldn't wish to answer that right now. It's something that should be monitored. I would personally say, as of this day right now, continue with those plans. Don't cancel them. Be very cautious about making a financial commitment or something that you can't back out of. But it is realistic that that would be a safe trip. And that is that the military offensive action would be over with, stopped, and that if it just be monitoring, or that horrible phrase, mop-up operations, might still be continuing, the war aspect of it, in all probability, should be over with. Or at least in such control that, again, the phrase is, it would be a safe trip to go.
Well, it's interesting, because up until a couple of days ago, I had just been so into the fact that the offensive part of it would be over in March or April, and that we'd be well on our way to the healing process. And
I shared with you prior to this, and I even think it's documented in a videotape, that there was some terminology given by me regarding the first 12 minutes of an offensive action, the next 4 hours, or the first 4 hours, and that military superiority would be accomplished by then. Now, I stated that weeks ago. That took place, and those increments were real. Took place, right? So in other words, I'm not just saying I was right, no matter, even though we're continuing on with this conflict and so on. Those things did take place. In the first 12 minutes, there was the electronic warfare that worked. And those systems that were, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. God bless the technology involved, they worked. And as a result, there wasn't airplane versus airplane. And there wasn't 1,000 airplanes shot down on both sides. God bless every one of those humans that fly those planes on both sides. There was not a major loss of life. I mean, this is a terrible thing to say, because there was loss of life. People have died over there. People are dying over there. But you're dealing with something that is a national or a worldwide war. And unlike any other war, other than possibly the War of the Roses, any other war, there's been nothing like that. And in that first 12 minutes, there was electronic superiority. Most communications were annihilated or temporarily stopped, and it allowed this surgical bombing, this very clean bombing, if you could ever use such a phrase, to be allowed, which put down all of the airports, all of the known airports, the existing airports. They were just, shall I say, temporarily annihilated. They were taken over. In the next 4 hours, the bombing raids took out the very real and serious threats that I disgustingly called toys. The toys I was referring to was the chemical plants, the biological plants, the nuclear plants. And all of the most serious that needed, that needed to be eliminated or stopped or non-usable that first day was accomplished in the first 4 hours. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's tactically unbelievable. It is phenomenal in itself. I'm not bragging about it. And I'm not saying, oh, lovey-dovey, let's try it again sometime. I hope this never has to take place. And I can promise you that there are no less than 3. I'm being very, very conservative on purpose, not to give any form of energy to greater numbers. There are no less than 3 immediate future scenarios that have been already prevented by the deployment and the proof of the existence of electronic warfare, of military capabilities by the United States and the the Allied countries with this new type of technology that you can actually launch a missile and stop it midair. I mean, it's never been done before. And I might add, when I made the first series of tape recordings, and when in 1981, the Patriot missile was a failure. In 1981, I'm not even sure, because I'm so bad on time, if it even existed then. I believe it was in existence then, and it was a miserable failure. And it was even suggested that the entire program be scrapped. And, you know, I hesitantly say, miraculously, those missiles are working quite well for the advantage of minimizing the loss of life.
I know, I'm sure that almost everyone seeing this probably heard on the television the other night that they said the probability of stopping the Scud missile was as if you were driving down the expressway at 60 miles an hour and opened up your door or window and reached out and plucked a blade of grass.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the Patriot missile
A
does.
particular blade of grass.
Yes, the one that you want. And that's what they have done to stop the,
You know,
within a 2-minute.
right, because of the flow of this conversation, I mean, honestly, because I have to be honest, I want to just throw out a caution and a warning that the systems, the facilitations of the military machine has worked extraordinarily accurately, mechanically correctly, let's say. I can't say good and bad because it's just not appropriate. So let me say mechanically accurately. And I want to warn, as of this time, to you and anybody, that be very careful about ever becoming arrogant or thinking that, you know, hey, we're just unbeatable and this and that and the other thing. As it stands right now, and this is only intuitive knowledge, this does not come from any military sources or out of books or TV or anything else. This is only Tom Sawyer's intuitive knowledge. Saddam Hussein, I'll say it that way, meaning, you know, his military attaches and, you know, his people, machines and armies, as well as he himself, do have additional potentials. I am currently aware of describable details, describable things, and I will not do that. Under the heading of, if I describe it in detail, it will give it energy, you know, that type of thing is one of the reasons. It is not appropriate to, you know, sometimes it is really not appropriate to give top secret information out, even if it's some other country. You know, prior knowledge of that, advertised knowledge of that, might force the use of that. You know, as if it's acknowledge the location or the type of thing, and before something, a counteract can be implemented, typically Saddam Hussein, he the character as he stands right now, will deploy it just to get rid of it. Now, well, we're going to lose it in another 2 or 3 days, we might as well use it now. And that type of mentality and that type of ego will do that. I mean, do you really think that he has enough love and desire, and I mean the right word is love, does he have enough conditional or unconditional love toward dolphins to ever give that a second thought?
What you were talking to me on the telephone, that the oil
No,
slick.
you know, let me put it this way. I have seen dolphins surfacing in 2 feet of oil, you know, to take their next breath. And it's, I mean, that, you know, as disgusting as that is, it is right and just for you and I to know that. You know, it's to be grossed out, to be offended, to be hurt by the existence of that. And you know why? Because it's real. Because it's the truth. Because it's happening. Doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it good. But I mean, should we be protected from reality if it's bad? And it's one of the problems of fanatical New Agers. That's a stereotyping, which I don't like to do, but and I've said it, fanatical, with love in my heart, fanatical New Agers. They have a tendency to say, oh, I can't handle this right now, and I want to just go, ooh, and do my Om Shantis and everything else, so I'm going to run away to Sedona, Arizona, where they don't even have televisions on Bell Rock. Right? And I mean, made the scenario. And I mean, many of us do that. We'll have a tendency to go, I can't handle this right now. I don't need this. I don't want this. I want to live in nothing but peace, love, and joy. And they're not taking responsibility. They are taking responsibility for themselves to a very large degree, and God bless them for that attitude. But they're blinding themselves to the existing reality that's around them. I mean, there are currently still rapes, murders, heinous crimes, deceit, manipulation. I mean, all of those things are going on. And should we all become reclusive and run off to our little Om Shanti pads up in the mountains or in the valleys and stuff like that and be insulated? There are things that you should move away from and insulate yourself from. If you don't feel comfortable in the inner city, move out. If you're lonely and don't like it at the ashram in the middle of the Adirondacks, move out. Move to where you feel you should be. But be careful about running away. And it can become habitual, too. And I mean, people, like Sudan was saying, the philosophical and psychological motivation, the ego I'm talking about, there are many people like that. There are you and me on subtle levels. I mean, we righteously think that we're better than he is because we have our own ego, but we think we have it in control. And the last time you checked with your best friend, he or she said, yeah, you're doing pretty good. But I mean, it's the same thing. Might be on a more mundane or lesser level or non-malicious, non-manipulative level. But it's there in all of us.
So on the other side of this war situation that we find ourselves in, even if we come out of it feeling like, we've saved the planet or whatever, along with the power of being able to do this is an even more heightened responsibility to keep this kind of power and capabilities in check. I mean, our country could go, or in the hands of someone coming into power here, could...
Well, again, with our House of Representatives, our Congress, our system is still working. And, of course, the feasibility of that is minimal, right, of what you're suggesting.
Yeah.
But, in the future, in the near future, you can't run away. You can't say, isn't it a wonderful thing that we can have these fanatical doves or peace protesters that say peace at any price? I saw a banner and I saw somebody marching, and they had flowers and the peace symbol and all this and that, and they had the peasant dress on, and the banner that she was carrying said, peace at any price. And I wanted to run up to her and go, at any price? I mean, like that. I mean, at any price? And you want peace at any price, no matter what.
Well, going back to what I used to think I believed in is, you have the right to die for what you believe in, but not kill for what you believe in. And now, I'm in a real quandary. I don't know where I am anymore. I talk about chaos.
Yeah. See, individualistically, in you, for you, your philosophy is still valid. In me, for me, the philosophy is still valid. In a circumstance of world events, that was on a larger scale. If you're talking about your neighbor at work, that was on a close relative, either relation or relatively speaking, in size and numbers, that is valid. It is valid within the individual. I mean, there are people in the military that have the same philosophy, exactly the nuclear missiles and bury them. And one of the problems with that is, in a couple hundred years, you've got a bigger problem. Because you got something that's not even manageable now, that is very below the surface, that will be coming to the surface, or, I mean, you can't erase problems. You can't wish them away, and you can't pretend that they don't exist. Now, how do you interact with that? A good example for people to, like yourself, who are in chaos, and that I have used for myself in my chaos with these contradictory philosophies. As I have my own philosophy, and my actions often contradict that. Those are things that I have had to do. And I've done some very lovely and wonderful New Age-ish type stuff. I've been to hands-on healing services. I have also literally, physically kicked another human being in the seat of the pants. Actually, physically, literally. Yes, I did. And I saved the person's life by doing it. I mean, I did. I saved the person's life. It was the only way I could get him out of harm's way. So, and I even laughed about it afterwards. I says, I've always planned on, since my near-death experience, to kick someone in the ass to save their life. And anyway, so that worked. I'm losing my train of thought. I'm being a little too silly here. Oh, I did.
Oh, you were talking about my chaos and.
Oh, and a system that I've used for my own chaos. Look backwards in time, even philosophically or mythologically, even to a degree, of what you might call the saints. Okay, now if they be Catholic Christian saints or a saintly individual, Melchizedek, St. Francis of Assisi. Okay, granted, you have to adjust to their time frame, the society, the country that they lived in, the cultural background, the religiosity, the sign of the times, were they at war, were they at peace, and so on. What do they do? Well, I'm not sure if I'm losing my train of thought if he's canonized a saint or not, but a very saintly individual, Padre Pio, passed on within our lifetime just recently. And of course, a very Catholic individual. So, neither accolades or condemnation. He was very Catholic. He was a Catholic priest. There is a reasonable chance that he'll be canonized a saint. So he's in that category at any rate. What are some of the things he did? He did vile, disgusting things, in my opinion. And I truly wanted to meet the man when he was still alive to lovingly chastise him or critique him. That was constructive criticism as I would approach it as. In other words, with full reverence in my heart. He was doing things that I totally disagreed with and would have liked to have the chance to ask him about it, tell him about it, and so on, debate with him. I should give an example of what I'm talking about. He had, among other things that are saintly, the capability of actually, very, very, very rare circumstance, of actually facilitating in reality, while incarnate, while alive in a human being, more of a human being than a spiritual entity. We say a spiritual human being, but it was more human than only spiritual, as opposed to a saintly, invisible helper, an angelic host, being spiritual with a certain human characteristic, like a appearance of a hand or a facilitation of telekinetic movement from a spiritual essence. I'm talking about a human being, an alive human being, that breathed and ate food. He had the ability to facilitate the uplifting of what I'll just term as a lost soul in purgatory, or a lost soul from a suicide scenario. It's from a human side, reality existing, reaching into the spiritual realm, and still being alive and existing as a human being. Extraordinary capabilities. But what did he do? He had to live and exist within the Catholic Church and be a subordinate, I'm saying that just factually, a subordinate to the Pope. What did the Pope, what did the bishops do to him and for him or about him? Among other things, they took away his permission or his right to say a Mass. I mean, can you imagine a priest having his ministry taken away from him by an authoritative figure of a bishop or a pope? I mean, it in itself is almost contradictory to their philosophy. And this was done. He was denied he was also punished. He was sent off to a cloistered box up on the side of a hill. Of course, he loved that.
Then he could get on with his work.
Yes. In fact, he did most of his serious work, with a greater intensity of facilitation and so on, in that capacity while cloistered, I'll say, I'll use that phrase. So how did he act and react? Now, he didn't run away, and he got in a lot of serious political and religious trouble for what he did. How did the saints act and react? Saintly people, individuals. What do they do? Is it a loving gesture to give up your riches and go and live among the poor? Well, that's a wonderful thing if you're going to help the poor. But if you're going to become just another poor person and be a burden on the society that ultimately feeds them and houses them, then you shrug your shoulders. How righteous is that? An ultimate intended loving gesture of an individual that I knew, that I'm aware of. His intentions were unconditionally lovely. His actions required his suicide. His actuality, as I have to say it, was a complete failure. Now, what does that mean? I mean, a friend of mine committed suicide. And trust me that what I'm saying is actual and the truth. For the purposes of helping the lost souls from suicide. And his irrational rationalization, the only way he could conceivably help them was to be one of them or be with them, since he had tried and tried and tried during his life to attain some kind of measurement of any form of facilitation for the uplifting or purification or helping of what I'm just bluntly or basically terming a lost soul in a purgatory scenario from suicide. An unbelievable failure. Now, I'm being judgmental, and I'm...
So he really didn't help them or himself. Well, he wasn't out there himself. He was out there.
Right. Now, here we have a failure, a quite unconditionally lovely, I'm emphasizing the L-Y, desire, intentions, and the actions were incorrect, were wrong, philosophically, religiously, and spiritually. I'm saying this for a reason.
And yet in other videos that we've done, you've said something like, what's the bottom line is what are your intentions?
That's very true. This is a circumstance that, in other words, can you have as an excuse that in your insanity, your rationalization, your psychological rationalization dictates to you that you have beautiful intentions, and your actions create a scenario that is harmful to the environment, harmful to humankind, harmful to yourself, as if it comes to life or death, or harmful to another person's psychology and so on. And there's a lot of gray areas in there, a lot of fine lines, and it depends on a lot of those things. So yes, the statement is still true that your intentions are initially maybe the most important. I'm not sure if it is the very most important thing, but one of the most important things. Your intentions are a priority. And if you fail at something with good intentions, it is usually a good thing. Certainly for yourself. Have you progressed? Have you learned? Have you? Yes. Okay. And of course, the example I gave was the most extreme, the most extraordinary. And here we have good intentions and a great deal of deliberation and time and work involved before actions were taken. And the actions that were taken was to commit a suicide. All right, and that is an extreme example of again,
Just
I started.
clarify, the person you're talking about now was not proverbial.
Oh, yeah.
Because you were,
yes.
one sort of led into the other.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a tendency to do that. Certainly was not he. It was somebody that I should not name. But, that I had known both before and after. Well, that's a funny thing to say. Both before and after his suicide. That's also true.
Just because it's you, I won't even ask. I think I understand. Okay.
But again, what does the sign say?
I'm going to tell you what it says. It says I'm going to get up and walk away and let you.
The viewers of this videotape are not supposed to know we have a camera person.
We should say thank you, Lynn, for the camera work. I'm going to move away and give you the last 15 minutes to sort of summarize what's the bottom line. Okay.
Well, just what comes to my mind, and maybe even be a summary of what we've talked about. One of the things that has just come to mind is another caution that I want to warn or caution any of you, and that is because of the examples that I've given and some of the actualities of the last 10 years, 10, 12 years, I want to truly warn people. There's a little bumper sticker and a little phrase. It's kind of like the symbol of a certain organization, and it states, "Expect a miracle." And I want to truly caution people about the one-sided part of that. Notice that it is right and just for you to expect a miracle. Most of us are human beings, and in the human capacity, philosophically speaking, I would really hesitate and warn people about expecting miracles. There have been several miraculous, and I'm saying miraculous, not qualified as my definition of a miracle per se, but some miraculous things that have happened in my life. I've been able to facilitate a few things that other people have designated as quite miraculous. And I'm thankful for that. I can even be proud of some of those things, righteously proud. But as far as having magic work, or don't worry, the saints will take care of us, or Saint Charbel, whose name I certainly wanted to mention regarding the Middle East, who I have heard almost nothing from by the Catholic Church, by spiritual beings, or from Saint Charbel, the essence of Saint Charbel himself, I'll say it that way. And I've been a little disappointed and disillusioned. I had an expectation of experiencing or feeling or being intuitively aware or having publicized such a thing as a saintly individual, such as Saint Charbel of the Christian Catholic Church. And it was again canonized by the Catholic Church from Baalbek, Lebanon, not too far away from the activities in the Middle East, and certainly part of the Middle East. And I mean, let me declare a plea. My God, this is the time. In other words, Saint Charbel, among other things, is attributed to being an environmentalist and for the ecology. And if there is any essence there, if there is any actuality to saints and powers of the saints and spiritual intervention and enhancement, I mean, I'm kind of crying out, now's the time. Maybe later this night you might want to give me a little boot in the rear end to know that the existence is there. But I'm flopping back and forth between cautioning people about expect a miracle and at the same time pleading for miraculous intervention. It's okay to be aware of those things, just don't truly expect it in that, well, I don't have to do my part because a miracle will happen. Or that you should ever say, well, Tom will tell us what to do, or Dan will tell us what to do, or the leaders of our country will show and tell us what to do. We're all individuals, and collectively we make up a very beautiful animalistic spirituality that still has control, and we have the responsibility there has been, in a matter of a couple years later, or a few years later, those same technologically magnificent cruise missiles being used destructively, not maliciously, we hope, philosophically, not maliciously, but destructively, for the purposes of putting down a scenario that, if it is not put down, it will not be able to be put down without the extraordinary destruction of the big blue marble, Mother Earth, or the horrendous, disgusting loss of life. I mean, in other words, in thousands and thousands of numbers, as opposed to 100 or a couple hundred. In other words, shall we ever dare say the scenario that's existing in the Middle East right now is currently the lesser of two evils? It's the lesser scenario of you can pay me now or pay me later. Because I'm really preaching and advocating that it is a righteous and just military intervention. I mean, I was hoping a vast majority of all of my work of the last 12 years has been for this very purpose of minimizing that which was precognitive to me as soon as I lie, not on that sofa, but in the position of the sofa right in this room, a little over 12 years ago. And on that third day, when I was well enough to ask my wife Elaine to turn the radio on, that I was starting to feel better and able to think clear, one of the things that I thought about was a nuclear detonation of a malicious nature that, by God, we didn't experience. A nuclear capability that would be used by a man by the name of Saddam Hussein as early as, I believe, 1984. I'm not sure of the year, but roughly 1984. And that did not take place, by God. With the help of some people, a garbage man from the town of Greece, a newly formed priesthood to facilitate the school of the prophets, people in organizations and individuals that don't know of the existence of any organizations. And collectively, we all facilitated a lot of these things and some of these things. Don't expect a miracle. Interventions will take place. I don't plan on cashing out in the next couple of days. I'll be doing my part. But I'm really seriously cautioning people that don't champion somebody who is telepathic. I have been very fearful of being called clairvoyant or telepathic or a psychic and things like that. And my God, it's been documented that, it's just the existing public documentation on the psychic things that I've been involved in is more than most internationally proclaimed psychics. I still don't accept the title, but don't